The galaxy had learned long ago that young civilizations were noisy. They shouted into the void with primitive radios. They launched fragile probes. They dreamed loudly and briefly before either maturing or destroying themselves. The Orion Arm, dense with ancient empires and quiet alliances, had catalogued thousands of such species. Most faded into obscurity before ever leaving their home systems. Earth was supposed to be one of them. Insignificant, unremarkable, forgettable. At least, that was the official classification recorded in the archives of the Galactic Concordium, the governing coalition of 27 advanced civilizations. Designation: Sol 3 pre-expansion industrial species. Status: harmless. The listening station commander Rathkesh of the Varelian Union had been assigned to listening post Theta 9 for nearly 4 cycles. It was a quiet assignment, the kind given to officers whose careers had plateaued. The station floated in the outer halo of a starless region between systems, far from trade routes or military patrols. Its only purpose was passive observation. Rathkesh stood nearly 3 meters tall, his exoskeletal plating glinting faintly under the soft blue lights of the observation chamber. His 4 arms rested behind his back as he stared out into the silent darkness. Nothing moved out there. Nothing ever did. Behind him, the monitoring arrays hummed softly. Thousands of signals drifted through the station's sensors, fragments of distant civilizations, commercial traffic, cosmic radiation. Noise. Mostly noise. Until a sharp tone cut through the quiet. The console flashed amber. Rathkesh turned slowly. Report. A smaller Varelian technician flicked its ocular lenses toward the screen. Commander, we are receiving a directed transmission. Origin? The technician hesitated. Sol system. Rathkesh's mandibles flexed slightly. Humans. A murmur passed among the bridge crew. Humans were new. They had only recently begun launching early interplanetary vessels, crude machines that crawled between planets using chemical propulsion. They were decades away from true interstellar capability, yet they had been sending increasingly powerful transmissions into deep space. Mostly curiosity, sometimes music. Once, strangely, a long recording of something called a baseball game. Rathkesh had never understood it. Display transmission, he ordered. The holographic screen flickered. A figure appeared. A human, male, middle-aged, wearing a dark uniform. Behind him hung a blue flag with a strange symbol, a cluster of stars arranged in a circle. The translation matrix began working instantly. The human leaned forward slightly, looking directly into the camera, and began to speak. The message: "This is Admiral David Halvorsen of the United Earth Defense Council." His voice was calm. Too calm. "This transmission is directed toward any interstellar civilization capable of receiving it." The bridge crew exchanged glances. Humans were speaking to the galaxy now. Bold, perhaps naive. Halvorsen continued. "We know you are out there." Rathkesh felt a faint ripple of amusement in his thorax. Of course, they suspected. Primitive civilizations always did. The human admiral's expression hardened. "For over a century, we have detected anomalous signals beyond our solar system. Artificial ones." The Varelian technician tilted its head. Their listening technology was surprisingly good. "Humanity understands that we are not alone." The admiral paused. Then his tone changed. Subtle, grave. "And we understand something else." Silence filled the listening station. Halvorsen leaned closer to the camera. "If you are listening to this message, then there is something you need to know." Faint static crackled through the transmission. The human's eyes seemed darker now. "Do not come here." The Varelian bridge erupted in quiet chatter. Rathkesh raised a hand. Silence returned instantly. The admiral continued. "This is not a threat." Another pause. "It is a warning." "The bridge reacts," the technician whispered, confused. "A warning? From them?" One of the sensor officers made a low clicking sound of amusement. "Primitive species issuing warnings to unknown civilizations is not unprecedented, Rathkesh agreed. Usually it came from fear or desperation. The human continued. For most of our history, we assumed the universe was empty. He looked away briefly. Then we started to realize something disturbing. The screen shifted slightly. Behind him appeared a holographic star map. Hundreds of points, highlighted in red. These systems once hosted complex biospheres. The bridge crew leaned forward. But they're gone now. Rathkesh felt a subtle chill. Halvorsen continued. No radio noise. No cities. No industrial signatures. His voice dropped. Just ruins. Another map appeared. More red stars. Thousands of them. The bridge grew quiet. Rathkesh folded his arms slowly. This was unusual. How had humans detected that? Their technology shouldn't be capable of identifying dead civilizations across interstellar distances. Yet the human admiral spoke with complete certainty. Halvorsen exhaled slowly. We believe something is moving through the galaxy. The lights of the star map dimmed. One region glowed faintly, a dark shape, advancing slowly across the Orion Arm. We don't know what it is. Another pause. But we've seen the pattern. He looked back into the camera, and we know where it's going next. A blinking point appeared. Saul, the unsettling claim. The technician spoke quietly. Commander, that is impossible. Rathkesh agreed. The galaxy had been stable for millions of cycles. No known entity systematically wiped out entire biospheres. Not even the ancient wars had caused devastation on that scale. Halvorsen continued. For 70 years we studied it. Another hologram appeared. Strange gravitational signatures, energy distortions, mass shadows drifting between systems. We tried to contact the civilizations ahead of its path. His voice softened. No one answered. The bridge grew colder. So we built something. Rathkesh's mandibles twitched. That line caught his attention. The human paused again, almost reluctantly. We built it because we had no choice. He clasped his hands behind his back. Humanity may be young, but we are not helpless. The screen flickered. For a moment, the transmission distorted, and then a shape appeared. The bridge crew stared. A massive silhouette, angular, armored. Not a planet, not a station, a warship. No, something bigger, something far bigger. The technician whispered. That cannot be human. The ship dwarfed anything the Concordium operated. It looked like a moving fortress. Weapons arrays lined its surface. And the energy readings, even through a simple broadcast transmission, the power output was staggering. Halvorsen spoke again. We hoped we would never need to use it. Rathkesh leaned forward slightly. We hoped the galaxy would already be prepared. The Admiral's expression hardened. But if you are hearing this message, his voice dropped, then you are not. The final words. Halvorsen stepped closer to the camera. If your civilization discovers Earth. His eyes were steady. Turn away. The Virelian crew waited. The Admiral finished. Because if what is coming reaches our system, the holographic image of the colossal warship brightened behind him. We will not let it leave. The transmission ended. Silence consumed listening. Post Theta 9. No one spoke. Finally, the technician broke the quiet. Commander, should we report this to the Concordium? Rathkesh stared at the frozen image of the human Dreadnought. He considered the message, the warning, the absurd scale of that warship. And then, he slowly turned away. Yes, he said calmly. Send the recording to the Central Council. He paused. But classify it as cultural broadcast. The technician blinked. You do not believe them? Rathkesh made a quiet clicking sound of amusement. Humans exaggerate. A few officers chuckled. The technician nodded. Of course. Primitive civilizations often invented grand threats to appear important. The report would be archived, catalogued, forgotten. Rathkesh gave the order. Resume normal monitoring. The bridge returned to quiet routine. Signals drifted through space. Stars burned in the distance. And somewhere far beyond the edge of human detection, something massive changed course, heading toward Sol. 3 months later, The first Concordium border outpost vanished. No distress signal, no debris, just silence. At first, they assumed a malfunction. Then another station disappeared. Then a patrol fleet. Entire star systems stopped responding. Ships sent to investigate never returned. Panic began spreading through the Concordium. Emergency councils convened. Scientists searched for explanations. None came, until someone remembered the archived transmission from Earth. The one labeled, Primitive Cultural Broadcast. When the council replayed it, they watched the human admiral's warning again. And this time, no one laughed. On Earth, deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, a cavern the size of a city slowly opened. Ancient blast doors separated for the first time in decades. Lights flickered on across kilometers of armored hull. Reactor cores awakened. Engines that could bend gravity itself began to hum. Across the surface of the massive vessel, letters burned to life. UEC Dreadnought Aegis, and far above the ocean, satellites quietly transmitted a single message: every human defense command on Earth. Threat vector confirmed. Launch protocol authorized. Deep within the Dreadnought, an old admiral looked up at the awakening systems and whispered to himself, "Looks like the galaxy didn't listen." Outside the cavern, the ocean began to boil. In the halls of the Galactic Concordium, panic was something that rarely happened. For nearly 6,000 standard cycles, the Concordium had been the stabilizing force of the Orion Arm. Its member civilizations were ancient, technologically advanced, and accustomed to solving problems before they escalated into disasters. Wars had occurred. Economic collapses had shaken trade sectors. Even rogue artificial intelligences had occasionally appeared. But entire star systems disappearing without explanation? That was something the Concordium had never encountered. And now it was happening again. The council chamber on Citadel Prime resembled a vast amphitheater of light. Floating platforms circled a central holographic star map that stretched nearly a kilometer across. Each platform contained representatives of the member civilization's species of wildly different shapes, sizes, and physiologies. Some floated in pressurized spheres, others stood on gravity pads. A few existed only as fields of electromagnetic energy projected through containment lattices. At the center of the map, a series of systems glowed crimson. They formed a line, a slow-moving scar across the Orion Arm. Council Speaker Thales' Orion raised a slender crystalline limb. Update. A projection flared to life. 3 additional colonies have ceased communication within the last 12 hours. The analyst reported. The star map flickered. 3 more lights turned red. The chamber rippled with uneasy murmurs. Representative Vorex Call, a massive reptilian warlord from the Drathari Empire, slammed a claw against his platform. "This is impossible." His voice echoed across the chamber like grinding stone. "No fleet can annihilate systems without leaving wreckage." Another representative, the luminous cloud, being Sevara, pulsed softly. "Yet the evidence shows otherwise." The analyst zoomed the map outward. The red systems aligned along a gradual arc, a path, and at the end of that path, one small yellow star. Sol. The chamber went quiet. Speaker Orion gestured toward the projection chamber. "Play the transmission again." The recording began. The human admiral appeared on screen. "This is Admiral David Halvorsen of the United Earth Defense Council." Around the chamber, the alien representatives watched in silence. Many of them had never paid much attention to humanity before. Earth had only recently achieved fusion propulsion and limited orbital industry. In galactic terms, they were barely out of infancy. Their political systems were fragmented, their technology crude, their military non-existent by Concordium standards. Yet here was one of their leaders, calmly warning the galaxy of extinction. "Do not come here." Several council members shifted uneasily. "This is not a threat," Halvorsen said again, "is a warning." The hologram behind him displayed the massive warship, Gasps rippled across the chamber. Representative Vorex Call leaned forward. That vessel, what is its mass? The analyst responded. Based on the transmission scale references, approximately 28 kilometers in length. Even the oldest civilizations of the Concordium rarely built ships exceeding 5 kilometers. 28 kilometers was not a warship, it was a mobile civilization. Call growled. Impossible, but the analyst continued. The energy signatures detected in the broadcast suggest a reactor output comparable to a small star. The chamber fell into stunned silence. Humanity had been discovered by the Concordium nearly 80 years earlier. At the time, their technological level had been classified as Stage 2 industrial, primitive, but promising. Observers noted several unusual traits. Humans were highly adaptable, emotionally volatile, and astonishingly persistent. When faced with problems, they rarely surrendered. Instead, they experimented. They failed. They tried again, and again. One Concordium sociologist had written a famous assessment. Humans possess an evolutionary trait we cannot easily categorize. When confronted with existential threats, they respond not with despair, but with creativity. Still, creativity didn't build dreadnoughts larger than cities. Representative Sivara's voice shimmered across the chamber. If the humans possess such technology, why have they never demonstrated it? Another council member answered. They have never been attacked. That explanation hung in the air. Because if the human admiral was telling the truth, they had not built the Dreadnought for war against the Concordium. They had built it for something else. The Concordium had already dispatched an expedition, Fleet Aurora Vanguard, 32 warships from 5 civilizations, advanced scanners, gravitational sensors, quantum detection arrays. Their mission was simple: intercept the anomaly before it reached inhabited space. The fleet's commander, Admiral Sereth Vel, appeared on the council's holographic feed. Behind her, the command deck of a sleek alien cruiser glowed with starlight. "We are approaching the last known disappearance site," she reported, scanning for debris fields or residual energy signatures. Speaker Orin asked the obvious question. "Do you believe the human transmission?" Vel hesitated. Her species, the Varelians, valued logic above all else. Statistically, the probability that a pre-expansion species constructed a dreadnought of that scale is extremely low. Call snorted. Exactly, Vel continued. However, the pattern of system disappearances aligns with the trajectory predicted in the human broadcast. Silence returned. Vel turned slightly toward her sensor officer. "Report." The officer froze. "Admiral, we are detecting something." The council leaned forward. "What kind of object?" Vel asked. The officer swallowed. I don't know." The main display flickered. At first, nothing appeared, just darkness between the stars. Then the sensors adjusted, and something emerged. Not clearly, not fully, just a distortion, a vast gravitational ripple bending the starlight around it. The analyst whispered. "Mass estimate?" The sensor officer ran calculations, then froze. "Admiral, that cannot be correct." Vel's voice hardened. "Report." The officer turned pale. "Estimated mass equivalent to a small moon." Gasps echoed through the council chamber. Moon-sized objects did not travel between star systems. Not naturally. Vel's voice sharpened. "Visual resolution." The sensors pushed harder. The distortion slowly clarified, and the council saw it. Something immense. Not mechanical, not biological, something alien in the truest sense of the word. A shifting structure of impossible geometry. Segments moving like tectonic plates, dark tendrils stretching outward across thousands of kilometers. The analyst whispered in horror. "It's harvesting the star." The object was drawing energy directly from the system's sun, not using collectors, not using reactors. It was consuming stellar energy like a predator feeder. Representative Call stood. "That is not a fleet." "No, It wasn't. It was something far worse. Admiral Vel stared at the display. Distance? 2 million kilometers and closing. How fast? The officer's voice trembled, acceleration increasing. Vel understood instantly. It had noticed them. She opened a channel to the Concordium Council. You are witnessing this in real time. Speaker Orion nodded grimly. Yes. Vel took a slow breath. Then you understand the implications. The chamber remained silent. Vel continued. If the human prediction is correct, this object will reach Sol in approximately 3 months. Representative Savara pulsed anxiously. Can your fleet destroy it? Vel studied the monstrous silhouette on her screen, then she shook her head. No, the word landed like a meteor. Our weapons are designed for fleets. She gestured toward the display. That is not a fleet. The distortion shifted. One of the object's enormous tendrils began moving toward the Concordium ships. Vel turned back to the council. We will attempt to slow it. Speaker Orion spoke quietly. Admiral, you understand the risk. Vel nodded. If the humans were telling the truth. She looked at the screen again. Then someone has to buy them time. Thousands of kilometers away, humanity had already begun preparing. Inside the cavern beneath the Pacific, the colossal Dreadnought UEC Dreadnought Aegis awakened piece by piece. Reactor rings ignited. Gravity engines spun. Armored plates shifted as the vessel slowly separated from its moorings. Engineers rushed through corridors the size of highways. Command crews took their stations. Admiral David Halvorsen stood on the central bridge. A massive holographic projection of the galaxy rotated before him. A red line traced the incoming threat, exactly where their predictions had placed it. A young officer approached. Sir, Concordium Fleet Aurora Vanguard has engaged the anomaly. Halvorsen closed his eyes briefly. So they didn't listen. The officer shook his head. No, sir. Halvorsen watched the fleet icons blinking on the display. Tiny lights. 32 ships. He whispered softly. Brave. But it won't matter. The officer hesitated. Sir, should we assist them? Halvorsen looked up at the massive hull readout of the Dreadnought. 28 kilometers of armored fury. Humanity's greatest secret. Built in silence for 70 years. No, his voice was calm. We launch when the line is crossed. The officer frowned. Line, sir? Halvorsen pointed at the hologram. The red path. The final star on the trajectory, Sol. If that thing reaches our system, his voice hardened, then the galaxy will finally understand what we built this ship to do. Admiral Vel's fleet opened fire. 32 alien warships unleashed everything they had. Particle beams, antimatter torpedoes, gravitational lances. The void ignited with light. For a moment, the anomaly slowed. Then one of its colossal tendrils moved, and the first Concordium cruiser vanished. Not exploded. Not destroyed. Just erased. The fleet scattered in terror. Vel stared in disbelief. What is it doing? The sensor officer whispered. It's not attacking us. Vel turned sharply. What? The officer's voice shook. It's ignoring us. Another ship vanished. Then another. Like insects brushed aside. The object continued moving. Toward Sol. Toward Earth. Toward the small blue world that had tried to warn the galaxy. The ocean above the Dreadnought parted as the massive vessel slowly rose toward the surface. Cities across the world watched the sky. For the first time in human history, humanity revealed its hidden shield. Admiral Halvorsen looked out at the stars and spoke quietly. Let's hope we built it strong enough. Far away, the Concordium fleet was dying, and something ancient, something unstoppable, was coming. Space had always been quiet. That was one of the first lessons taught in every Concordium Naval Academy. Battles in vacuum did not roar with sound. They did not echo with thunder. They were silent flashes of light and mathematics. But as Fleet Aurora Vanguard died, the silence felt heavier than any noise. Admiral Sereth Vel stood motionless on the bridge of her command cruiser. Before her, the tactical display no longer resembled a formation. It looked like a dying constellation. 32 ships had entered the system. 17 remained. And those 17 were scattering. Status, Vel demanded. Her voice remained calm. But the tension across the bridge was visible in every rigid posture. A sensor officer answered. Enemy mass still accelerating toward Sol trajectory. How much damage have we inflicted? A long pause. Then the officer whispered. None detected. None. Not minimal damage. Not ineffective damage. None. Vel stared at the monstrous distortion on the main display. The thing moved through space like a living eclipse. Its immense structure bent starlight into warped arcs. Vast plates of unknown material shifted across its surface like tectonic continents drifting over an ocean of darkness, and extending from its body were the tendrils, thousands of kilometers long, each one capable of erasing a warship with casual indifference. Vel spoke quietly. Hell. Increase distance. The officer hesitated. Admiral, retreat? Vel's 4 eyes narrowed. No, she gestured to the display. We will observe. Because there was one thing that terrified her more than the creature itself. It wasn't fighting. It was simply continuing its journey. The Concordium fleet wasn't an opponent. It was an inconvenience. Across the galaxy, the Galactic Concordium watched the battle through real-time relay. Inside the vast chamber of Citadel Prime, silence had replaced the earlier arguments. No one spoke now. Because the evidence was undeniable, the human warning had been correct. Every weapon the Concordium possessed had been unleashed against the anomaly. Gravitational spears, antimatter detonations, even the experimental neutrino collapse torpedoes. They struck the entity with enough energy to crack planets. And the creature ignored them. Representative Vorax Call leaned forward slowly. His species had conquered entire star clusters, but now his voice carried none of that confidence. That is not a warship. No one disagreed. Representative Sevara pulsed faintly with unease. It is behaving like an organism. A scientist on the analysis platform responded. Yes. The hologram magnified the object's surface. Segments opened, closed, shifted. Energy flowed through it in patterns disturbingly similar to biological circulation. Another analyst spoke. It is feeding. The chamber darkened as a new projection appeared. Energy streams flowing from the nearby star, drawn into the entity, consumed. Stellar mass conversion, the analyst explained. Whatever this organism is, it feeds on stars. A ripple of horror passed through the chamber. Stars were the anchors of civilization. Without them, systems died. Planets froze. Life vanished. Representative Call spoke again. And it is moving toward Sol. The chamber turned toward Speaker Thales' Orion. For the first time in centuries, the High Speaker looked uncertain. What of the human Dreadnought? The analyst hesitated. We have no confirmation it exists. They would soon. Because across Earth, the sky was changing. Human cities were not silent. Billions of people filled the streets, the oceans, the rooftops, watching, waiting. Humanity had kept it secret for 70 years. Now, it was rising from the depths. The Pacific Ocean boiled as the titanic hull of the UEC Dreadnought Aegis emerged from the water. 28 kilometers of armored structure, layer upon layer of black alloy plating, massive spinal cannons embedded along its central axis, and surrounding the ship like the rings of a mechanical planet. 6 rotating gravity reactors. News broadcasts streamed across every human network. Children stared upward in awe. Old veterans saluted. No one had ever seen the ship fully assembled before. Even many of its own engineers had only worked on isolated sections. Now, the world finally understood the scale of what had been built beneath their oceans. Inside the Dreadnought's command chamber, Admiral David Halvorsen watched the launch telemetry. Status: primary reactors at 98%. Gravity drives synchronized. Orbital clearance confirmed. The officer hesitated. Sir, the Concordium fleet is still engaging the anomaly. Halvorsen nodded slowly. Yes. An officer asked quietly. Will they survive long enough? Halvorsen did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked at the tactical map, the anomaly, the dying fleet, and the red line leading straight to Sol. Then he said something none of them expected. They already have. The bridge crew looked confused. Halvorsen pointed at the clock. Every minute they keep it distracted is a minute we gain. Back near the anomaly, Admiral Vel's fleet had shrunk to 8 ships, one by one. The others had vanished, not destroyed, not shattered, simply erased by the immense tendrils sweeping through space. Vel studied the creature carefully. Analysis. Her science officer spoke. It is ignoring our attacks, but it is reacting to our proximity. How? When we approach within 200,000 kilometers, it diverts tendrils toward us. Vel's mind raced. So it has a defensive reflex. Yes. Vel leaned forward. That means it has something worth defending. The officer looked puzzled. Admiral, Vel pointed toward the creature's central mass. Helm. Plot intercept course. Gasps erupted across the bridge. You want to approach it? Vel nodded. If this is an organism, her eyes narrowed, then somewhere inside that structure, there is a brain. Across the solar system, telescopes and sensors watched the impossible happen. The Dreadnought lifted from Earth's oceans like a rising continent, its massive gravity engines ignited, and slowly, very slowly, the ship began climbing toward orbit. The energy readings were staggering. Even distant Concordium monitoring stations detected it instantly. On Citadel Prime, alarms rang. Massive energy signature detected in Sol system. The council stared as the projection updated. There it was, the ship from the human transmission. Real, and far larger than anyone had believed. Representative Call whispered. That is not a warship. The analyst nodded. No, it is a fortress. Admiral Vel's cruiser surged forward. The remaining 7 Concordium ships followed. The anomaly responded immediately. Several tendrils shifted toward them. Vel ignored the danger. Maximum forward thrust. Admiral, do it. The ships plunged closer to the creature than any vessel had dared approach. The display filled with impossible geometry. Metal, stone, biological matter, all fused together into a structure that defied comprehension. And then the scanners detected something. The science officer gasped. Admiral, energy concentration detected. Where? The officer highlighted a region deep within the entity's core. A glowing mass pulsing like a heart, Vel whispered. Target that. But Admiral, we can't reach it. Vel smiled grimly. No? She opened a channel to the fleet. All ships, prepare full antimatter payload. The bridge crew froze. That would destroy us too. Vel nodded calmly. Yes. Then she looked back at the glowing core, and maybe it will slow the monster. Across the Concordium, billions watched. Across Earth, billions more. 2 civilizations, one ancient, one young, stared at the same unfolding event. The alien fleet surged forward. 8 ships, tiny compared to the cosmic predator before them. Inside the Dreadnought Aegis, Halvorsen saw it happening. He recognized the maneuver instantly. Admiral Vel, he murmured softly, brave fool. The officer beside him asked quietly, Sir, should we warn them it won't work? Halvorsen shook his head. No, he watched the fleet accelerate toward the creature's heart. They already know. The officer looked confused. How? Halvorsen whispered the answer. Because we tried it first. 8 Concordium warships reached the anomaly's core and detonated simultaneously. The explosion lit half the system. Antimatter annihilation ripped through the creature's central mass. For a moment, the monster stopped moving. Across the galaxy, hope flared. Maybe it could be hurt. Maybe the humans had been wrong. Then the light faded. The creature moved again, its wound already sealing, as if the explosion had been nothing more than a scratch on the bridge of the Dreadnought Aegis. The crew watched the sensors update. Admiral Halvorsen closed his eyes briefly, signaled the Concordium Council. Yes, sir. What should we tell them? Halvorsen opened his eyes and looked at the approaching anomaly. Tell them. His voice was calm. The line has been crossed. Outside the Dreadnought's hull, the engines began to roar, and humanity's greatest weapon finally turned toward the stars. For 70 years, humanity had carried a secret heavier than any weapon. It was not the Dreadnought. It was not the reactors. It was not even the knowledge that something ancient was moving across the stars. The true secret was how humanity discovered it, and why they knew it could not be stopped by conventional war. The story began long before the UEC Dreadnought Aegis was ever conceived, long before humanity even understood that the galaxy was populated with ancient civilizations. It began with a quiet scientific mission. In the year 2083, a human deep space telescope array orbiting Neptune detected something unusual in a nearby system, Tau Ceti. At first, the anomaly looked like debris, a wide halo of metallic fragments drifting around the star. But when probes were sent, the truth became impossible to ignore. The debris was artificial. It was the shattered remains of a civilization, gigantic orbital structures, fragments of habitats, broken rings that once circled planets, all reduced to silent ruin. The system had once hosted something enormous, something technologically advanced, and something had destroyed it completely. The discovery was hidden from the public for years. Governments feared the panic that would follow, but among scientists, the implications spread quickly. Humanity had proof. They were not alone, and they were not the first. Over the following decades, human observatories began scanning deeper into space. What they found terrified them. The ruins weren't unique. Dozens of systems showed similar signs: collapsed megastructures, dead biospheres, empty stars. Each one looked like the aftermath of an extinction event. But the destruction wasn't random. There was a pattern. A line of ruined systems stretched across thousands of light years, and the ruins were getting younger the closer they were to Sol. Something had been moving, slowly, patiently, consuming civilization after civilization. Human astronomers called it the silent path, because every system along its route had gone quiet forever. In 2119, humanity launched the probe Hawking 7 toward one of the newest ruin sites. The probe carried the most advanced sensors humans had ever built. It was designed to study the aftermath of extinction, but it found something else. The probe arrived just as the system's star began behaving strangely. Energy levels dropped. Solar output fluctuated. Then, the probe's cameras captured something emerging from interstellar space. At first, it looked like darkness. Then the instruments adjusted, and the shape became visible. The same impossible structure that Admiral Vell had seen centuries later. A vast living construct. A predator large enough to devour stars. The probe transmitted for 37 seconds. Then it vanished. Those 37 seconds changed human history. The footage was shown to world leaders in secret meetings across the planet. The conclusion was simple. Earth was on the silent path, and humanity had roughly 1 century before the entity arrived. For the first time in history, the nations of Earth united around a single goal: survival. Humanity could not outrun the creature. It moved too slowly for that to matter, but eventually it would reach Sol. And when it did, everything would end. Unless humanity prepared. The project was given a simple name: Aegis. It was not announced publicly. The public explanation was that Earth was investing in planetary defense infrastructure, but beneath the oceans, beneath mountains, and beneath polar ice, humanity began building something unprecedented: A ship, not just a warship, a last line of defense for an entire civilization. The Dreadnought would not be designed for exploration. It would not be designed for fleet combat. It would be designed for one single enemy. The Star Eater. Human scientists studied the debris fields of the destroyed civilizations. Many of those ancient species had tried to fight the creature. Their weapons had been powerful. Planet-cracking beams, antimatter cascades, gravitational collapsers. None of them worked. But in the wreckage, humanity discovered something interesting. Some civilizations had come close, very close, and those attempts left clues. Fragments of technology that hinted at a weakness, not a biological weakness, not a structural weakness, but a physics weakness. The creature's body existed partially outside normal spacetime. That was why conventional weapons failed. Energy simply bled through it, but certain exotic gravitational fields disrupted that stability. Fields strong enough to anchor it fully into real space. Once anchored, it could be hurt. The problem was scale. Generating such a field required power equivalent to a star. No civilization had managed to sustain it long enough to finish the job, but humans were stubborn, and they had time. Instead of building thousands of ships, humanity built one. A single vessel designed to generate a gravitational trap large enough to bind the creature completely into physical reality. The Dreadnought would act like a cage. Once the creature was trapped, the rest of the weapons could work. Mass drivers capable of launching asteroid-scale projectiles, stellar-grade laser arrays, gravitational shear cannons, every weapon humanity could imagine. All focused on one target, but there was a cost. The trap required energy levels so extreme that the Dreadnought's reactors would burn themselves out after a single engagement. The ship would not survive the battle, and neither would most of the crew. The Aegis was never meant to come home. Inside the command chamber of the UEC Dreadnought Aegis, Admiral David Halvorsen stood before the Concordium Council's holographic projection. They had finally opened a direct channel. The alien leader stared at the colossal bridge around him. Human officers moved between towering consoles. Entire tactical stations were the size of alien warships. Speaker Thales' Orion spoke first. Admiral Halvorsen, your warning was correct. Halvorsen nodded. Yes. Representative Vorax Call leaned forward. Why did you not tell us the full truth? Halvorsen answered calmly. Because until today, we were not sure we would survive long enough for it to matter. The council remained silent. Then Sevara asked the question everyone feared. Can your Dreadnought destroy the entity? Halvorsen paused. Then he told them the truth. We don't know. The chamber went still. But we know this. Halvorsen continued. We are the only ones who ever built a weapon specifically designed to fight it. The council members exchanged uneasy looks. Call growled. What do you require from us? Halvorsen looked at the tactical map. The creature had already crossed the outer boundary of the Sol system, approaching the orbit of Neptune. Nothing. The aliens blinked. Nothing, Orion repeated. Halvorsen nodded. You already helped. He gestured to the fleet logs. The sacrifice of Admiral Vell's fleet bought us the time we needed. Then he turned toward his crew. All hands. The massive ship vibrated as its engines surged. Battle stations. Far beyond Pluto's orbit, the Star Eater finally reached the solar system. It slowed slightly. The star at the center of the system burned brightly. A fresh source of energy. A new feeding ground. But something unusual waited in its path. The creature's sensors, if such things could be called sensors, registered the object immediately. A structure, small compared to stars, but enormous compared to anything it had encountered before. 28 kilometers of armored defiance. The Dreadnought moved forward. Alone, between the monster and Earth. Inside the command chamber, Halvorsen watched the creature grow larger on the screen. The crew felt it too. Fear. Excitement. Resolve. A young officer whispered. That thing destroyed hundreds of civilizations. Halvorsen nodded. Yes. Then he looked out at the impossible enemy. And today, it finally met one that was paying attention. The Star Eater drifted closer, millions of kilometers away, still feeding on solar radiation, still unstoppable. Then the Dreadnought's 6 gravity reactors ignited simultaneously. The solar system shook. Space itself bent around the ship. Massive gravitational fields expanded outward like invisible nets. The creature reacted instantly. For the first time in recorded history, it changed course, trying to escape. Halvorsen smiled grimly. Too late. The gravitational cage snapped shut. Across the Concordium, every sensor registered the same thing. The impossible entity had just been forced fully into normal space. And suddenly, it had mass. Real mass, meaning it could be destroyed. Halvorsen turned to his weapons officer. Open all batteries. Thousands of cannons aligned. Mass drivers the size of skyscrapers powered up. The spinal laser ignited. Fire. The first shot left the Dreadnought. And for the first time in millions of years, the Star Eater screamed. For millions of years, the Predator had crossed the galaxy unchallenged. Civilizations rose. Civilizations burned. Stars dimmed as the creature fed, leaving cold graveyards behind it. Every species that tried to fight it discovered the same terrible truth. Their weapons could not truly touch it. Energy passed through its shifting body like wind through fog. Planets shattered against its hide without leaving scars. Even the greatest fleets of ancient empires had failed. But in the Sol system, something unprecedented had just happened. For the first time in its existence, the Predator had weight. Across the Galactic Concordium, sensors screamed. On Citadel Prime, the central observatory filled with stunned silence. The anomaly that had once defied measurement suddenly registered on every instrument: mass density, structure. The gravitational cage generated by the UEC Dreadnought Aegis had dragged the creature fully into normal spacetime. It was no longer a shadow. It was a thing. A vast thing. The analyst stared at the numbers. Mass equivalent to 2 small moons. Representative Vorax Call whispered hoarsely. By the ancient suns. And then the human Dreadnought fired. Inside the command chamber of the Aegis, the vibration of the spinal mass driver rolled through the hull like distant thunder. The weapon launched a projectile the size of a skyscraper, accelerated to a fraction of light speed. When it struck the creature's anchored body, the impact tore a canyon through its surface. For the first time since the Predator had entered the galaxy, matter exploded outward from it. Chunks of alien structure, some metallic, some biological, some neither, spun away into the void. The creature reacted instantly. Across its immense body, tendrils unfolded like the limbs of a waking giant, thousands of kilometers long. They lashed outward toward the Dreadnought. Inside the bridge, alarms flared. Incoming structures. Admiral David Halvorsen remained perfectly still. Point defense. The outer hull of the Dreadnought erupted with light. Hundreds of defensive cannons opened fire. Streams of plasma and kinetic interceptors shredded the nearest tendrils. But there were too many. One colossal appendage slipped through the barrage. It slammed against the Dreadnought's forward armor. The entire ship shuddered. Damage reports flooded the bridge. Section 12 armor breached. Outer hull pressure loss. Gravity stabilizers fluctuating. Halvorsen studied the readings. Then he gave the order. Rotate shield rings. 6 immense gravitational reactors surrounding the Dreadnought shifted their orientation. Invisible waves of warped space rippled outward. The next tendril struck the field. Instead of hitting the ship, it folded inward. Crushed by its own momentum, the alien structure twisted violently before snapping apart. Across the galaxy, observers stared in disbelief. The Dreadnought was not merely attacking the creature, it was wrestling it. The Star Eater had devoured thousands of civilizations. Every one of them had followed similar strategies. They attacked from distance. They launched fleets. They tried to overwhelm it. The creature adapted quickly to such tactics, but the humans were doing something different. They had not come with a fleet. They had not tried to surround it. They had built a cage, and inside that cage, they were hitting it with the force of a small asteroid every few seconds. Mass driver rounds pounded the creature's surface relentlessly. Laser batteries carved glowing scars through its armor. Gravitational shear cannons twisted entire sections of its body apart. For the first time in millions of years, the Predator hesitated. Inside the Dreadnought, the price of the battle was becoming clear. Reactor temperatures rising. Mass driver coil degradation at 20%. Armor plating failing across forward sectors. The Aegis had been built for one fight, but even its monstrous systems were straining under the pressure. The creature adapted quickly. Instead of striking directly with its tendrils, it began altering the surrounding gravitational field. Space warped. The solar wind twisted violently. The Dreadnought lurched as invisible forces pulled at its mass, stabilizers failing. Halvorsen nodded slowly. It's trying to break the cage, because if the creature escaped the gravitational trap, everything humanity had built would be meaningless. Divert all remaining reactor output to the containment field. The engineer on duty froze. Sir, that will overload the core. Halvorsen answered quietly, no. Throughout the Dreadnought, thousands of human crew members continued their work with silent determination. Some were soldiers, some were engineers, some were scientists who had spent their entire lives preparing for this one moment. None of them expected to survive. They had known that when they volunteered. In a maintenance corridor near Reactor Ring 3, a young technician looked out through a narrow observation port beyond the thick armored glass. The cosmic battle raged. Chunks of alien matter drifted past like asteroids. The star glowed brilliantly behind the monstrous creature. The technician whispered softly, "My parents always wondered why I joined this project." Beside her, an older engineer chuckled. "Did you ever tell them?" She shook her head. No. The engineer tightened a bolt on the reactor housing. Probably better that way. Back on the bridge, the tactical display flashed red. The creature had begun concentrating its tendrils around the Dreadnought. Hundreds of them, forming a massive sphere of closing structures. "Admiral," the tactical officer said quietly, "it's trying to crush us." Halvorsen studied the display. If the tendrils closed completely, the ship would be torn apart. There was only one way to stop it. He turned toward the weapons officer. "Prepare the singularity charge." The bridge went silent. The singularity charge had been designed as the final weapon of the Aegis. A controlled artificial black hole. Once deployed, the Dreadnought would not survive the gravitational shock. The officer whispered, "Sir, that's the last stage." Halvorsen nodded. Yes. He looked at the screen again. The creature's enormous body, the tendrils tightening around them, Earth glowing faintly in the distance. Then he said calmly, "Begin countdown." Across the Galactic Concordium, billions of alien citizens watched the battle. For centuries, they had considered humanity a minor species, young, primitive, emotionally unstable. Now, they watched one human ship doing what none of their ancient empires had managed, hurting the unstoppable. Representative Savara spoke quietly in the council chamber. They knew. Speaker Thales's. Orion nodded. Yes. They built that ship knowing it would never return. Call stared at the display. The Dreadnought surrounded by the cosmic predator, and whispered, "They built it anyway." Inside the Aegis command chamber, Halvorsen opened a transmission channel. "To all Concordium civilizations," his voice carried across the galaxy, "we believe the creature's core has sustained catastrophic damage." He glanced at the reactor readings, "But we cannot maintain the containment field much longer." Behind him, the countdown reached 60 seconds. "If the singularity charge works," he paused, "this will be the last star it ever reaches." The council chamber remained silent. Halvorsen continued, Humanity warned you because we believed the galaxy deserved the chance to prepare." He smiled faintly. "Turns out, we were the preparation." The countdown reached 10 seconds. Halvorsen turned to his crew. "Ladies and gentlemen." The ship shook as the tendrils closed in. "It's been an honor." Across the galaxy, every screen displayed the same sight. The human Dreadnought. Tiny compared to the vast Predator. Surrounded. Outnumbered. Outmatched. And still fighting. The singularity charge armed. The gravitational cage blazing brighter than a star. And the creature screaming as the trap tightened. Then the countdown reached 0. And space itself began to collapse. For a moment, there was nothing. No ships. No stars. No light. When the singularity charge detonated, spacetime itself folded inward like fabric collapsing into a fist. Across the solar system, sensors went blind. Across the galactic concordium, every telescope and listening array lost signal simultaneously. Even the ancient monitoring stations that had observed the Orion Arm for thousands of years registered the same anomaly. A sudden gravitational spike, followed by silence. The singularity created by the UEC Dreadnought Aegis was not natural. It had been engineered with terrifying precision. For 8 seconds, the artificial black hole devoured everything within several thousand kilometers. Alien tendrils, fragments of the Star Eater, mass driver projectiles, even pieces of the Dreadnought itself. Then the containment system designed to fail after the collapse detonated. The singularity evaporated in a final burst of Hawking radiation. The shockwave rippled across the outer solar system. Neptune's atmosphere stirred. Comets shattered in distant orbits, and then the sensors began to recover. The galaxy held its breath. Inside the observation dome of Citadel Prime, the analysts worked feverishly. Data streams flooded their displays. One of them whispered, "We're receiving new telemetry from the Sol system." Speaker Thales' Orion stepped forward. "Show us." The holographic star map of Sol reappeared. The sun burned at the center, untouched. The outer planets remained in their orbits, but where the battle had taken place, the sensors detected something strange. A massive debris field, chunks of alien material, fragments of twisted structures. And at the center of it all, nothing. The Star Eater was gone. The analysts checked the readings again, then a third time. Finally, one of them said the words the entire galaxy had been waiting to hear. "It's dead." The victory did not feel triumphant, because another scan quickly confirmed what everyone already feared. There was no sign of the Dreadnought, no power signals, no hull fragments large enough to contain survivors. The Aegis had been consumed by its own weapon. Representative Vorex Call lowered his head slowly. "That ship carried an entire generation of their best people." Sevara pulsed softly. "They knew that would happen." Orion nodded. "Yes." He studied the debris field surrounding the solar system. For 70 years, they built a weapon designed to destroy a god. A long silence filled the chamber, and when the moment came, they used it. Back on Earth, the sky had been filled with strange light during the battle. Auroras spread across the planet as the gravitational shockwave passed through the system. People gathered in streets, fields, and rooftops, watching, waiting. For hours after the singularity detonation, no one knew what had happened. The global communication networks were silent. Military command centers refused to release information. Then, finally, a transmission appeared across every broadcast channel. The message came from a small orbital station above Earth, a backup relay platform. The face on the screen was exhausted, but calm. It was Commander Elena Ramirez, the second in command of the Aegis project. She spoke quietly. "The enemy has been destroyed. Across the planet, billions of people exhaled," Ramirez continued. But the Aegis and its crew did not survive the engagement. The silence that followed felt heavier than grief, because every human watching knew someone who had been aboard that ship. Ramirez lowered her head briefly. Then she said the final words of the broadcast. Admiral Halvorsen asked that we share one final message with the galaxy. She activated the recording. The video had been recorded before the battle began. Admiral David Halvorsen stood on the bridge of the Dreadnought. Behind him, the massive reactors glowed. His voice was steady. "If you're seeing this, then the fight is over." He looked directly into the camera. "For most of our history, humans believed the universe was empty." A faint smile touched his face. "When we discovered that wasn't true, we were excited." He gestured toward the stars beyond the bridge. "We imagined exploration, friendship, trade." Then his expression darkened slightly. "But the first thing we actually found out there," he paused, "was a graveyard." The camera shifted slightly, revealing fragments of alien ruins displayed on the bridge monitors. Halvorsen continued. "Civilizations far older and more powerful than us had already tried to survive what was coming." His voice softened. "They failed." Another pause. "But humanity has always had one unusual habit." He leaned forward slightly. "When we see a mistake repeated over and over again, we try something different." Behind him, the massive hull of the Dreadnought trembled as the battle began. Halvorsen finished his message. "We warned the galaxy because we believed everyone deserved a chance to prepare." He smiled again. "But if you didn't listen," his voice became quiet, "that's okay too." He straightened his uniform. "Because humanity did." The recording ended. The council chamber on Citadel Prime remained silent for a long time. Finally, Speaker Orion addressed the assembly. "The Sol system is secure." A ripple of relief moved through the chamber, but Orion continued. "This event changes the political reality of the entire galaxy." Call growled softly. "Because the humans built a weapon capable of destroying that creature." Orion nodded. "Yes." Sevara added, quietly, "and because they were willing to use it." The analysts continued studying the battle data. What they discovered over the next several days stunned the Concordium even more. The Dreadnought had not simply destroyed the Predator, it had learned during the fight. The ship's targeting systems had adapted in real time. Human engineers had built algorithms capable of analyzing the creature's structure and adjusting weapon output accordingly. The entire battle had been a conversation between two predators, one ancient, one new, and the younger one had won. Within months, diplomatic missions began arriving in the Sol system. Ships from dozens of alien civilizations entered human space, not as conquerors, not as explorers, but as something unfamiliar to humanity. Visitors seeking alliance. The Concordium officially reclassified Earth's status. No longer a minor pre-expansion world. Now, it carried a new designation, strategic civilization. The species that had defeated the Star Eater, the species that had done what no ancient empire had managed, and the species that had tried to warn everyone before the battle even began. 1 year later, a monument was built in Earth orbit, a ring-shaped station constructed from the salvaged debris of the battle. Fragments of the alien Predator were embedded within its structure. Pieces of the Aegis were placed at its center. The largest surviving section of the Dreadnought's hull, nearly 2 kilometers long, was mounted like a blade pointing toward the stars. Visitors from across the galaxy traveled to see it. At the entrance to the memorial, a single plaque had been placed. The inscription was simple. "They warned us. We did not listen. They saved us anyway." Years later, Concordium scientists continued studying the battle debris. One discovery unsettled them more than anything else. Buried deep within the remains of the Star Eater's body, they found something unexpected. A signal, faint, ancient, not biological, not mechanical. A beacon. And it wasn't coming from the creature itself. It was coming from somewhere far beyond the edge of the galaxy. The analysts brought the data to the council immediately. Speaker Orion studied the signal. Then he asked the question no one wanted to hear. How many of these creatures are there? The scientists could not answer, but when the message was forwarded to Earth, the human response came quickly. A new Dreadnought project had already begun. In the centuries that followed, historians across the galaxy wrote about the battle in Sol, not as a simple war, but as a turning point, because the ancient civilizations of the Orion Arm had always believed wisdom came with age. Humanity proved something else. Sometimes the youngest species, the one still learning, still adapting, still refusing to accept impossible odds, could accomplish what ancient empires could not. And so the story spread across the stars, a simple legend told in 1,000 alien languages, about the day the galaxy ignored Earth's warning, until the human Dreadnought appeared and reminded everyone why you should never underestimate a species that has already survived its own extinction once.